My name is Leonie Buckley. I work with a company called Buckley, and I'm a computer engineer. And more specifically, I work on our projects to do with space, and I'm testing how computer chips will survive in space. Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that really any kind of computer engineering related job gives you a huge amount of flexibility, purely because you're able to work on a computer and you can do that anywhere. Um, but not only that, can you work anywhere? It's extremely flexible in terms of the times of day you work. So me, for example, I prefer to start early in the day and finish early because I play quite a bit of sports. So that means that I'm really flexible in terms of getting to training and getting to my matches. So all we have to do is we have to make sure that we have some overlap with everyone in the office. But it's also great, particularly at the moment, that you can work from anywhere. So like, for example, if you want to go on holidays, you could not necessarily go on holidays, but go work down the country for a couple of days, just a different change of scenes. So it's really, really flexible. So when I first left college, I started working with a company called Movidius. Actually, I did an internship with them after my third year, and then did my thesis with them. And then I worked with Movidius for about 2 years, and they are actually acquired by Intel. So through that process, I started working with Intel. And the current company I'm working with, Ubashka, we're using a lot of the Movidius hardware. It's Movidius chips. So I had that expertise, and that's how I came to work with Ubashka, that they were looking for people who had the expertise. It's kind of a great Irish success story because Movidius was an Irish founded company, and now Ubashka is another Irish founded company, and we're continuing on using the Movidius hardware. We tend to start work early, so we'd be in at about 8 o'clock because we have an office in Spain, so they're an hour ahead. So it's nice to get in and kind of, we try to coordinate with them. Normally get in, it's nice, our office is quite small, there's only 4 or 5 of us in the office in Dublin, so everything is done in the same room where we have the coffee, and we generally have breakfast in there as well. So it's nice to kind of have, you ease your way into the day, chatting to everyone, and then we might have a couple of calls with the people in Spain. And in general, you're working on, I'd be working on one big project at a time, but you're kind of supporting a lot of the other projects as well. It's nice actually to work in an open plan office, because if you have an issue, it's very easy to chat with someone, say I have this issue, have you ever had this? And chances are that they have come across it and know someone else who's come across it as well. The days don't change much day to day, but the projects would change. But it's nice actually being in that kind of small open plan office, that you get to know everyone very well, but then also keeping the communication with the other office as well. Especially now that we're working from home, it's important to have those calls to keep up that social interaction. And you really miss it when you're working from home, because if you have an issue, it's much more difficult to write an email to someone for something small. Whereas if you're sitting beside them, it's much easier to bounce off ideas and actually learn much more. I think the coolest part of our job is definitely the work we're doing with space. Like, to be honest, before I started working here, I didn't have much interest in space, and actually it terrified me, and it still kind of does terrify me, the vastness of it. But we're kind of much closer to Earth than the planet side of stuff. It's definitely seeing how much work that the European Space Agency do, and actually how much work goes on in Ireland as well. I was really surprised how many different companies and organizations in Ireland are involved in it. Like, through the work I'm doing, I'm trying to see how these computer chips will survive in space. So I've got to travel to a couple of different places. I got to go to CERN 2 years ago to do some testing, and another place in Germany to do some radiation testing. And like, the scale of these places is really, really incredible. And like, for me, I didn't realize what a big deal it was, but one of the guys working with us does physics, and like, going to CERN was like the biggest thing in the world for him. So really, I've come to appreciate how amazing it is. So it's definitely the space work, but also the different types of projects that we do, all kind of using very, very similar technology. Like, we have some applications in healthcare, different ones in warehouses. It's the different types of work you can do with the same expertise. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, that the travel can be difficult sometimes, and I guess it's especially with the work we're doing, that when we go to places like CERN or the other places where we're testing with the radiation, that it's really, really expensive to run these facilities, so that you really have to optimize the time you have there. So for example, when we were in CERN, we're using a beam there, and we're going for 44 hours straight with no break. So it can be very, very physically and mentally demanding, especially Like when you're 30 hours in, you have to fix a problem that it's something that would have taken you 5 minutes normally. When you're there, it can take you something like 2 hours or something, because you're just so tired. And it's difficult to move the hardware, and you want to make sure everything works properly. But that's where, whenever we do any of these testing, we do a lot of dry runs back in the office. We do it a couple of times, so when you get there, it should just be like second nature, that you try to predict any issue that may come up. So it can be very stressful. I think anyone who does any kind of engineering knows that all the stress and worry you go through to get a problem working is worth it then for the reward when you finally get it working. It's yeah, it's very, very nice when it finally works. So in secondary school, I ended up doing the subjects that I enjoyed. I did higher level maths, physics, chemistry, applied maths, and business. And the business is only because there was no other subject that I was particularly interested in. But definitely the crossover between the physics and the applied maths was really, really useful, because I did engineering in college, and the first year maths was very, very similar to both of those. And also with the applied maths, because as it says, it's applied, so it's I think it's quite similar to the maths course I have now, the project maths, where it's kind of more real life scenarios. Whereas when I did the Leaving Cert, they had just introduced project maths, so the maths course, it was kind of there's no context to any of the problems, so it was just like solve an equation as opposed to applying it to a real life scenario. So that's where the applied maths was made it much more interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say extracurricular projects, but when I was in college, I did an internship after my second and third year in college, and that definitely influenced the path I took. So the first internship I did after second year was in a consulting firm. Now it's on the technology side of stuff, but it definitely made me realize I didn't want to go into consulting. And it's kind of a lack of certainty where you're going to be from project to project, that you never really had a base. You kind of work on something and hand it off, whereas at the moment, the projects are on, you kind of see it from start to end, and it's really, really nice to see that completion and how things progress. It definitely made me realize that's something I didn't want to do. I think that's really important as well, that even if you take like extra classes or you do internships, and if it doesn't work out, at least you've realized it's something you don't want to do, that you won't waste time that later on in your life. And then after my third year, I did an internship in Movidius. At that stage, Movidius were still, they were quite far progressed with the technology they had, so it was really, really interesting to see that kind of a startup that was past their kind of beginning phase. And like the work I was doing was really interesting, and also tied into what I was doing in college. And I continued with that to do my final year project or my thesis. And that, so I never really left, I guess, after I did that internship there. So that definitely the internships really, really influenced where I went. I guess when I was in Intel and Movies, that we had a lot of opportunities to do. I was in a research group there, so we had a lot of opportunities to try out things I wouldn't necessarily have got to try out in other companies, because again, kind of like I said, when I did the internship in the consulting company, that if something you were researching didn't work out, that it's still a valid result. So a lot of the work we did, we got to produce posters and publish papers, and I got to travel to a couple of different conferences in America and in Europe. So that was really, really interesting, actually, to go and present the work that you've done. I think what's been more rewarding has been where I am now, the projects I'm working on, actually seeing them from concept stage and then actually finishing them out and passing them on to a customer, and then seeing them in action in the real world. That's actually much more rewarding than publishing on paper on something that could possibly work. Now, it's still amazing when you get that published, but actually seeing something working in the real world is very, very exciting. And especially with the hardware, when you have prototypes, when you have start off with something that's tied together with tape, and then you go and see something that's like, you might 3D print it or something, and actually see something very, very robust, that's very, very rewarding. Kind of hard to say, but definitely it's one where it allows you to live the lifestyle I'd like as well. It's not necessarily working in any particular field. I think it has to be something that challenges you. Definitely that you're not doing the same thing day in, day out. And definitely, I think doing engineering in college and then the jobs that I've done after that has given me, I think it allows you to have a skill set where you can work in lots of different fields. Like even from the people I was in college with, we're all doing completely different things. Like some people went into, like from doing computer engineering, some people are in accounting, some people are in consultancy firms, people are working in other areas of finance. That kind of having that skill set allows me later on in life, if I do want to change jobs that I have that flexibility. But I think it would definitely be that the lifestyle I want to have would come first, and then a job that fits in with that. Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to talk is very with people is very, very important. I actually saw a quote the other day that engineering isn't hard, but people are. That you have to be able to deal with people and interact with them, and being able to talk about anything with someone. Like I feel what has been great for me is that I play sport and that I have an interest in sport. And so if you're even if you're meeting someone at a conference and you find that they're interested in sport, you can spark up a conversation with them, and then you never know where that conversation is going to lead. So definitely I think the interpersonal skills are really, really important. That you could be the best coder or like the best in your field, but if you can't interact with people, then you're kind of limited in the type of projects that you can work on. Like you don't need to be a social butterfly in any sense, but you have to be able to be cordial and polite, and definitely I think to be able to take criticism. That if you can't take criticism, you'll never progress in what you're doing, because there are definitely people who know more than you, so you have to be able to take that on board to progress. So definitely I think that the personal skills are very, very important, and it takes a while, but just to be able to chat about anything with people, that they'll then remember you. And it actually makes, if they need to pick someone for a conference or pick someone to do something, that if you've made an impression on them, then actually you're more likely to be picked out.